This is the Business Owners IT Podcast with Anthony Gerasch and Ryan Carter, where tomorrow's technology meets today's conversations.
Hi, I'm Tony Gerasch.
And I'm Ryan Carter, and this is the Business Owners IT Podcast.
A podcast where we discuss tips, tricks, and solutions for business owners involving all things tech.
And continuing our deep dive / series into the CIS controls. This week we're talking about CIS Control 8, Audit Log Management. This one focuses on the collection, management, and review of audit logs to ensure that security events are captured, monitored, and available for analysis to detect suspicious activities or incidents. What a mouthful. All right, Tony, why don't you take us through the key aspects?
Yeah, so the key aspects, right? Centralized log collection, comprehensive logging, log retention, in my little paper here, right? Log protection, regular log reviews, incident investigation and response. So them are the 6 key parts of the CIS Control number 8.
Centralized log management or collection. Why don't you take us through that one?
Yeah, centralized control log collection. So I'm going to read my little thing here, right? Ensure that audit logs from the key systems, application, network device are collected and stored in a central location to simplify monitoring and analysis. Yeah, that's a mouthful. And, again, we're dealing with small businesses, typically, even still today, we're in a client-server type of relationship, right? We have clients that connect to Active Directory. And, a lot of the security logs of logging in, logging out, and things that are happening are collected on the server, right? But, this can even dive in a little bit deeper, right? So that's just server logs, right? But every individual workstation has logs.
Yeah.
Right? Now, it's not practical to collect every single log from every single workstation. A little bit down further, they talk about protecting them, and we can get into a little bit about that as well. And then you think about your logs. So now you have your computer logs and your server logs. Then what other logs do you have? Your firewall logs, your switch logs, your access point logs, your, there's all kinds of data running across your network, right? So you might have logs on your Internet of Things, you know what I'm saying? When you think about centralized log collection in the bigger clients, right, we put in a SIM. So you can kick off what a SIM is if you want.
I knew you were going to ask me what that was.
See, there you go.
And I got it right here.
He got it on his iPad.
Yeah. I just call it a SIM every day. It's security information and event management.
Yes.
So, Tony just took us through kind of like where our logs are. Our switches, firewalls, access points, computers, servers, all of that. Well, we need to, identify where those logs are, and then the next piece we do is we take those logs and we point them to one centralized place, and that's that SIM. And then the SIM, obviously, just doesn't sit there and collect logs. For some places, it sends them out to a security operations center or a SOC that's managed 24/7, looking for different events and alerts and all of that.
Yeah. And one thing about a SIM too, right? And we use a company called Soxotter, right, for our SIMs. They're a good partner of ours.
Yep, shout out.
And shout out to them. And the biggest thing the reason I like them is because they're able to see everything. So, there's a lot of people like Huntress and ThreatLocker and the rest of them. They have the ability to collect these logs in a central place location, but they're only seeing the things from the smart devices. They're not seeing traffic from the Internet of Things, other things that are plugged into our network. So what's important to me is that somebody's watching the telemetry of everything. And because, we could have something on our network we don't know about that's going through our switches, that's going through our firewalls, that's accessing our DNS and everything else that's ending up reaching the sites in China, Russia, Belarus, all those places that we know are bad.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things that a security operations center can do. They can look at this traffic all at one spot and then also see what's going on with the network, right? Where, okay, I see these attacks happening on the domain controller in these computers, but I also see data coming back and forth from places that don't belong.
Yeah, and some of these attackers they're smart. They'll get into your system and they'll sit and wait.
Yeah.
They'll do their own monitoring to figure things out, and then maybe they might kind of poke and prod. They might make a new account somewhere, or they might try to exfiltrate just a tiny bit of data out to the cloud somewhere, or just put it somewhere on a Dropbox that you wouldn't know about. And that's where the SIM comes in. It's going to see that account get created and then ask, did you create this account?
Yeah.
Maybe they plug something in on your network. They're going to say, hey, we just saw this new MAC address on your network. What does that mean? What is it? Or they're going to ask, you guys say that Dropbox isn't legal, but all of a sudden we saw some data go out the Dropbox. What does this mean? And then we're able to, stop that in the beginning before they start exfiltrating massive amounts of data,
right,
or attacking the network with ransomware, and D, all the above.
Yeah. And you got to understand that, a SIM's not for every company, right? But the bigger you are, the more important this is.
Yes.
So comprehensive logging, again, that's, log critical events such as user logon, system change, administrator actions, or security alerts. This provide detailed records. Again, you're gathering that information. If you have identity management, which is super important, whether it's in the cloud or on premise, right? You just need to make sure your logging set up so that you're collecting those, those invalid logins. When you look at invalid logins too, there's a couple different kinds, right? There's the invalid login where I have a valid username and password, right? I have a valid user, but not a good password. And then there's the ones where I have, I don't have a valid user, I don't have a valid password, right? And that can indicate a brute force type of entry.
Yeah.
So when you get into that, the logging of your accounts, it's important. In today's world, again, we're also using ThreatLocker a different way here, because we're talking about, audit logs for just logging and logging out, but also audit logs for what they're getting access to.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the storage control on ThreatLocker just the most awesome thing I ever saw.
And another thing too about comprehensive logging is that event logs for Windows, especially Windows Server, is not domain controllers. It's not. It doesn't log everything. It's the plain Jane vanilla out of the box isn't logging everything. And some of these companies like SockSoda would be able to tell us or other people what we should be looking for in the event logs and turning on. There's a lot of checkboxes in there that you can do that a lot of us don't know about or know about. I know about now, but didn't know about in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is Microsoft only logs successful logins, right? So that's one of the biggest changes, right? So whenever you set up a new domain controller, you want to be able to log successful and unsuccessful logins. If you're not logging unsuccessful logins, you're never going to know that somebody's trying to brute force you.
Yep, very true.
So log retention, right? So that's basically how long you're going to keep your logs. What's the appropriate log retention, that you'll have. Some people will keep them long term. There's different log retentions for everything. Some people overwrite them when they get to a certain threshold of data. So, I mean, in this control, you're going to map out, how long do you want to keep your logs?
Yes.
What is the reasonable amount of time? I could tell you, I've been in some conferences and stuff where they said that attackers can be in your system 200 days before they attack you. I mean, that's a lot of days of logs, right? So, that's tough.
Yeah,
that's something you have to decide.
Yeah, and don't credit your SIM or your security operations center to keep those logs for you without having the conversation and paying them big money for it, because it's not cheap to keep them forever or for a certain amount of time. Yeah,
the storage is expensive.
Yeah.
So when you do the CIS control, right, you're gonna define what your log retention is. Log protection. Okay, so this is a good one, right? So this goes back to, again, you want to protect these logs, right? And when I say protect, there's a couple ways we can protect, right? First thing is users don't have administrative privileges to their PC, right? So if somebody gets in as a normal user, they can't delete these logs, right? So the logs are there, they can't delete them, they can't shut them off. The other thing is important computers should be backed up. Yeah. Right. So if your servers are being backed up and you're doing full backups of them, and some of the computers are being backed up that are important, you're going to be protecting those logs, because you're going to have logs that we can go back to. Right. So that's another way to protect them. Right. So you also need to, when I think about logs, you have to keep the integrity of those logs, right? So if you do get into a situation where you're going to be into a legal matter, right? You got to be able to know, that those logs, the integrity of those logs are good and they can be used.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, they're not compromised.
Yep. Reviewing of the logs. Do you have any more on log protection?
No, go ahead.
You're reviewing of the logs, right? So regularly reviewing and analyzing logs for abnormal activity. Automated tools to generate alerts with suspicious behavior. This is a tough one, right? Too, right? Small businesses, they don't have like people. We can't sit there and watch their security logs day in and day out.
Right.
So if you have a SIM, it's going to Security Operations Center. They have guys that are just doing that. Our EDR helps with that, endpoint detection and response. Huntress is that product. I'll call out to them. They're monitoring, right? The same thing, Threat Locker's there too. If stuff is getting blocked, we can look for it. But this is a tough one, right? Because most small businesses can't afford for somebody just to watch their logs.
Right, exactly. It does get very expensive.
Yep. So and then the last one, incident investigation response. So use audit logs as your key way to find an unauthorized access, right? So that's what the purpose of the logs are, is basically to go back in time and figure out, how something happened, when it started happening, whose computer it happened on, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think
kind of a boring topic.
Yeah, let's we'll go through the objective, and I got a couple small things.
Yeah. What, do you want to go through it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So the goal is to ensure the organization can detect, investigate, and respond to a security incident through proper collection, management, and analysis of the log. In summary, this control ensures that the logs are properly managed and monitored to provide visibility into system activity, detect suspicious events, that's a tough word for me, and support incident response efforts. So, again, anytime something happens, we're looking at those logs, we're trying to go back and figure out what's going on.
Yep. And, the audit logs may be the only way to, method for companies to identify any attack or compromise, in their network. So that's why this is important.
Yeah.
And it goes back to, I guess this would be kind of the tip of the week, this is the first CIS control, is to know all of your assets in your company.
Yep.
And then you're going to have to know what those assets can do. Like, do they have any type of logging, and how can you centralize that logging to see where it's at? Yeah. To see what's going on with it, and then maybe have a security operations center that can look at it 24/7. So yeah, that's my tip, is to know what all your stuff is and know how it operates, with the logging.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty boring topic, but it's an important topic when something happens.
Yes, sir, it is.
All right. So what I'd like to do is thank everybody for tuning in to the Business Owners IT Podcast, and we hope to see you next week.
Yep, we'll see you next week, where we talk about CIS Control number 9, email and web browser protections.
Oh boy.
Yes, sir.
Unique computing solutions. Your IT challenges solved.